Hi, and welcome to simple.web, developing RESTful websites and services made easy. Here at the very tail end of aspConf 2012, and following on for some fantastic talks, so I hope I can maintain that high standard. I'm Mark Rendell. All my contact information is at the bottom of the screen there. You can get hold of me on any of those things. If you have any questions, unfortunately we didn't get this working on live meeting, so if after watching the video you've got any questions, do feel free to use any of those vectors to get in touch with me with your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. So, what is simple.web? The primary pattern in web development these days is MVC, Model View Controller, and I'm not convinced that that is the best pattern, and simple.web takes a different approach, which I am calling Model View Handler. Effectively, Model View Handler has one class for each URI in your application, and by doing that the Simple Web framework adheres to the single responsibility principle. Each class handles a get or a put or a post, but only one. So each class handles a get XOR a post XOR a put. And if you're not familiar with the single responsibility principle, it's a principle of object-oriented design, and it is summed up as a class should have one and only one reason to change. And if you think about the average MVC controller, there are many different actions all contained within one class. They generally have one controller per resource and one class which is responsible for getting all of those entities, getting one of those entities, creating a new one of those entities, showing a form to create a new one of those entities, showing a form to edit one of those entities. And as I have worked with MVC, both ASP.NET MVC and Rails over the last few years, I've seen controllers just expanding and expanding. And if you go to Google and search for single action controller, you'll see that over the last couple of years various people have actually adopted a new sub-pattern within MVC where they create a separate controller for each action and wrap things up in there. So all Simple Web is really doing is taking that pattern and baking it in at the very basic level of the framework. So apart from the one class per URI single responsibility principle, we also have various other principles from what Robert Martin has called solid. We have interfaces to define behavior on each of the handler classes, and we'll see how that helps to create a nice testable application later on in the presentation. We have composable applications, the open-closed principle, so everything can be composed very easily, and there's very little setup and routing tables and other things like that. And because this is a web application framework and not just a web service framework, we also have views, and in the current version we're on 0.3.1 as I'm recording this, and the Razor view engine is supported at the moment, and there is a slight difference in the way Simple Web copes with views. A handler does not return a view a view attaches itself to a particular model or a handler, and then that relationship is handled in the other direction. And also the view has direct access to all the variables on the handler. This is starting to sound rather complicated, so I think what we should probably do at this stage is a quick demo and start to introduce some of the concepts of simple data. Simple data, not simple data. Simple web. Simple data is the other thing. So yes. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to say File, New Project, and yes, we'll just pop that in temp for the time being, and we'll create an empty ASP.NET web application, and we'll just call it Hello Simple Web, and if you've never created an empty ASP.NET application, all that effectively gives you is the necessary references and a web.config file with very little at all in it. So I'm going to go to Package Manager console here, NuGet Package Manager, which I know other people have been talking about during this conference, and I'm just going to say install package simple.web, and that should pull down 0.3.1, which is the current version, and we've got various dependencies at this point, various components that are being added in, and that's made a change to the web.config. So let's take a look at what that's done. So effectively this has added in various sections and configuration settings to make the Simple Web Framework handle HTTP requests. Now, because some people are still using Visual Studio 2010 with the Visual Studio development server, I have left in both the system.web HTTP handlers section and the system.web server handlers section. Since I'm going to be running this on top of IIS, I'm going to take the system.web section out there, and I've pushed something up to NuGet with the wrong type in there, so there will be a 0.3.1.1 being pushed before I go to bed this evening. So that's the only changes necessary to web.config there. And if we take a quick look in Solution Explorer, and if I close down that references section there, we can see that the NuGet package has also created an index.cs for us, and you can see here that we've got a class called index. The class has a URI template attribute which is just set to / / for the root of the site, and that class doesn't inherit from any base class, so you can have whatever base classes you want in there, define your own abstract classes. All the class has to do to work with simple.web is implement an interface that says what action it's going to handle, and in this case that's a get action, and this one is also implementing an iOutput interface to tell SimpleWeb what kind of data it's outputting, and that's just raw HTML, which is a very simple wrapper type, and we can pass a string directly across to that. So if I now run this application, and I just get simple.hello coming up there, and if I change something in here, aspConf2012, and run that again, and we can see that that is running in there like that. So that is the fundamentals of creating a simple.web application. Obviously that's extremely simplistic, but before we carry on and look at something more complicated and in-depth, and don't worry, we will, let's go back and talk about some of these interfaces a bit. So we have HTTP interfaces here. We have both synchronous and asynchronous interfaces. So for the synchronous side we have get, post, put, delete, patch and head, and on the asynchronous side we have an async version of each of those interfaces. The async versions, if we just pop back into the code quickly, we can see that the get method, which is defined on the iGet interface, returns a status, which is just 200 at this point for HTTP status for OK. iGet async, if I change that there, just returns a task of status, and that sorry, getting confused and trying to write .NET 4.5 code there. That's not going to work. So we can just say return task.factory.startNew, and we'll just have something that returns status.OK, and that will now run asynchronously in exactly the same way. Let's just put an async in there just to make sure that we can see that that's working properly. Okay, so we have an asynchronous pipeline within simple.web to support that, and it's probably worth talking a bit about why you would want to use an asynchronous programming model on a web server. For most .NET developers who've been working on desktop applications in Windows Forms or WPF, or particularly in Silverlight, which insists on asynchronous method calls, we know why we use async on the client side. It's to stop the UI thread from blocking so that you can carry on moving windows around. The window can carry on updating and displaying progress updates, but cancel buttons still work, all that sort of thing. On the server side, it's less obvious why we would use async, but the server has a limited number of threads. Even in .NET 4, where the thread pool count was multiplied greatly, particularly if you're on 64-bit .NET. Under IIS you've got 32,000 and whatever threads available to you, but when you have a web server trying to service tens of thousands of requests, if you have a thread which is being locked to a single request, while that request waits for SQL Server or MySQL or other web services or whatever it may be to come back from a long-running request, that thread can't serve any of the other people who are trying to get through to the web server. By using the task parallel library based asynchronous model on the web server, along with ASP.NET's and IIS's support for asynchrony, you can say, okay, this thread is now going to go back into the thread pool, carry on servicing other requests, and then whenever this database call or web service call comes back, we'll just grab another thread and we'll carry on, and we'll write the response out. And so to make that nice and easy, we have all these asynchronous interfaces within simple.web. Okay. So we've got lots of other interfaces as well. On the request side of things, we have an iInput, which allows you to specify a model that will be uploaded in a post or a put or a patch, and that can be form data, that can be a JSON document, that can be an XML document, and you can implement your own content handlers to handle other types as well. We have an iUpload files interface, which will add a collection of file objects to the class, and those will be set by SimpleWeb when the request comes in. We have an iRequire authentication, iLogin page and iLogin interface. All of those allow you to specify that the handler is part of the secure area of your site. And similarly on the response side, we have an iOutput of T, which allows you to say, I'm going to return an object back down. We have an iOutput stream, which will allow you to write directly to the response stream. iMayRedirect will add a location property to your class so that you can return a 302 or a 303 or a 307, and then that will redirect the browser or other client, and various others as well, cacheability, IE tag, iModified, which will allow you to set various different headers. Let's just carry on through here. So what does this mean in terms of the structure of our application? Well, it means handlers can derive from other handlers and can derive from other handlers. We can take advantage of inheritance. So if you have a set of URIs below a certain point which share a common part of the path with maybe some variables inside there, that will work quite nicely. You can define those properties in one class and then they'll just be available in all the others. And it also means that we have encapsulation, so the handler holds all the state and the logic for each request and response, and it doesn't hold any state and logic for things that it doesn't necessarily want to be dealing with. Okay, I think there's been altogether enough talking and nothing like enough code. I'm a quarter of an hour into this and I haven't actually shown you anything at all yet that couldn't be done with any other framework. So let's dive in and we'll take a look at a proper application written using simple.web. Okay, so let's start another new project, and we'll put this one in the temp as well, and we'll call this awesome thing, and we're going to create a sign up page. No, we're not. And we'll start a new project and we'll put this into its own folder, and we're going to call this awesome thing. And we're not going to build an awesome thing, we're just going to build a sign up page for an awesome thing. And go down to here and we'll just install that simple.web package again, and that's pulling through there nice and quickly. And we'll go into web.config and we'll just remove that HTTP handlers section again, and we'll put the simple HTTP async handler in there, and then we'll go in and we'll find our index page, and at this point we really want to start looking at views and being able to have slightly more interesting things going on than raw HTML and header things being put out. So we'll add a new folder here, and we'll just call that views as a convention, and then we will add in a new item, and we're going to have to call that an HTML page, and then we'll call that index.cshtml, and we can get rid of all of that code there, and we'll just bring in some code that I've got over here, and immediately first line of this view code here, you can see that we have a new directive type. I'm still trying to work out how to persuade Visual Studio's CSHTML editor to work properly with Razor views that are not inside an MVC application. If anyone wants to help with that, that would be very much appreciated. So we can see here that this is looking for a folder called CSS, so we'll create that folder as well, and we'll just create that site.css file in there. At that point at least we can say site.css, and we'll just bring in this hideous CSS that I've come up with for this site. I am not a designer, as you will very shortly be able to see. So what else do we have here? We have images as well, so we need to go in and we'll just create an images folder, and then we will just pop over here into my copy folder, and we'll turn on show all files, and we'll just include awesomething.png in the project, and that's there now. Unfortunately, at that point simple.web is not going to know that things in those folders should be served as static files. We're going to have to put something in there to tell it that. So we'll add yet another new folder, and we'll call that one startup, and then inside startup we'll just put a quick class and we'll call it static setup. And static setup is going to implement the iStartupTask interface, and this is an interface you can implement on as many types as you like, and they'll all be run individually in an arbitrary order. If you have things that have to happen in a certain order, then you need to put them in a single startup task. If it doesn't matter what order they run in, then break them up into lots of separate tasks. This hopefully makes the system easier to configure and work with, and means also that third-party plugins that need to do some configuration of their own can just put in a class that implements iStartupTask, and that will be run for them automatically when the application starts up. So in my static setup, I'm just going to put in some code to set the CSS and the images, and also the scripts folder, which doesn't exist just yet but will do shortly, and then we go into our index handler, and we can take off the ioutput raw HTML, and then we should, when we run this, get that CSHTML page pop up there with my lovely image out of my images folder and some gorgeous CSS and a CSS3 styled button there and everything. I know if I came to this site I would definitely be signing up for a beta invitation, because I want to know what the guy who made this page could possibly have coming in the near future. So, as you can see, the index page doesn't specify a view at all. The index page just says, I'm okay, carry on, and simple.web actually goes and looks through all the views during the startup and warm-up of the application, and links the views to the handlers automatically, and it can do that either using the handler directive or in fact just the model directive. So if you have only one view that works with a particular type of model, and that might be customer or IEnumerable of customer, then it doesn't matter which handler has returned one of those, the view engine in SimpleWeb will automatically work out that association, and in fact it just treats HTML like any other content type. So if the client has asked for text/HTML or XML plus XHTML, then it will go off and try and find a view. If not, it will go for one of the other content types like JSON or XML or image or whatever it might be. So we can see here that this form is pointing off to a sign up endpoint, so let's go and we'll add a sign up class as well, and we'll just call that post sign up. And in post sign up we are going to implement the iPost interface, and we'll just have that post option there, and we're also going to take an input of sign up. Now I need to add that reference there, and then we'll just create a class sign up, and all we're going to put on there actually is a public string called email. So now we need to do something with that, and excuse me just one moment while I install one more package at this point, so that we can put our signing up user somewhere useful. And I need to go into web.config and add in a connection string for simple data to use. So we'll just pop that up at the top there, so we have an awesome thing connection string, and that's pointing to a signups database that I have previously created on here. Let me just bring up Management Studio very quickly and show you the signups database, and that's got a table in there, and if I open that up in design view, you can see that we've got an ID and a created at and an email and a number, and we just need to insert something into there in this post screen. So we are going to get a database object from simple data, and we'll just say open main connection awesome thing, and then we will say var inserted equals db dot signups dot insert, and then if we go up to there and say implement members, we'll see that that gets and input property of type sign up from that interface there. And so here we can just say input dot email, and then we're just going to create a completely random property here. We're going to say prop int number, and then we'll say number equals inserted dot number. So if you're not familiar with simple data, then why not go off and learn all about it and then come back. But basically that is an insert and retrieve back in simple data, and now we can just carry on and return that 200. Okay, so the last thing we need to do here is put in a URI template, and we'll just put /signup in there, and that will now hook up to the post from our index.cshtml here, but we need a view for signed up, so let's go and add in a view here as well, and we'll say add a new item HTML, and we'll just call this signed up.cshtml, and in here we will just put a handler directive, and say this is going to come from awesomething.post sign up, so that's just the name of the class there, and then we'll put in a dot type, need the exclamation mark of course, of HTML, and then in here we'll just put in a head and the title, and some body text here, so thank you for signing up, and another paragraph here saying you are number at handler.number. So here we can see that we're pulling the number property directly out of the handler. That's talking straight to that property there, and as soon as I get the Razor integration working properly, you will get IntelliSense on that handler property there. So if I now run that application up again, and I'm going to get a server error, and that's just because it's trying to browse directly to that CSHTML page there. So here and now I can put in Rendell at aspConf.com, because that's not a valid thing, and then we'll click sign up, and it says thanks for signing up, you were number 3, because I already had a couple of records in my sign up table, and so here we can select those top 1,000 rows out, and there you can see how late I'm recording this, 5 to midnight, still half an hour to go. So yes, we have the post has worked correctly, so it's all looking good. So we've now got the potential customer-facing side of the site absolutely perfect. How could you want it to be any better than that? Now, of course, we need something for us to log into and find out who has signed up and how many people have signed up, and maybe send them some emails. So for that, we need an admin area of the site. So I'm going to go in and add another new folder here. And we'll call that admin, and in there I'm going to put an admin class. So let's use the ReSharper way of doing that, and we'll just call this admin. And on here we are going to put I get and I require authentication, and we'll just implement the members on those. So from the I get interface we've got our get method as usual, and I require authentication adds a property called current user, which is of type iUser. So we can go off and one thing you'll notice with a lot of these request side interfaces is they come in from ReSharper at least with a private get automatic property, and that's because the interface is only specifying a set accessor on that property. As far as the I require authentication interface is concerned, we don't actually need to be able to get it, we just need to be able to set it. Obviously you might want that property to be gettable from other places. So that I require authentication is going to check to see whether there is a session cookie set on this user's session, and if there's not, it's going to direct them off to a login page, which we need to create as well. So let's go off and we'll create another folder, and we'll just put login inside this folder, and then in there we'll put a login page class, and we'll set a URI template on there, and call that /login, and on here we'll just say I get again, implement that, and that's just going to return 200, and then we'll also put the iLogin page interface on there, and again that's just providing a single property which the request pipeline will set for us, which is return URL. Now at that point that's all we have to do. We don't have to tell admin where to go to get that login. The simple web framework will just look through all the types that it's got available to it and find the one that implements iLogin page, and then it will redirect there, and the return URL will be set for us automatically. And we just need to put in a view for that. So let's go back to our views folder, and we'll put in another HTML page, and we'll just call that login.cshtml, and let's just copy some code in there. And so you can see here we have the handler specifier at the top there, attaching this view to that login page class. We'll just put a more sensible title in here that says please log in, and then we've just got a standard form which is posting back to /login on there. Method is post, and down here we're pulling that return URL off the handler and putting that into a hidden field on the form there, so that will come back to the right place. Now let's just pop in another class here to handle that post back. call that, if I can get the mouse onto the right screen, post login, and this is going to implement quite a lot of interfaces at this point. It's going to implement iPost, and it's also going to implement iLogin, and we want it to be able to process some input, so we'll create a login class for that. And obviously it's a login page, and so that means it might redirect. We'll just put in a model class down here for the login, and we'll put 3 properties in there: user, password, and return URL. And let's just implement all those members there. So going through these in order, the iLogin interface has added this logged in user property, and that's got a public getter, so this is something that the pipeline is going to want to read. Then we have the input property of type login, which is coming from there, and we also have the location that's coming from iMayRedirect, and that's for us to set the location that we want to redirect to if we return a redirect status. And so we'll just pull in, let's just put in some very basic authentication that just checks to make sure that it's me. So we'll say if input dot user is Mark and input dot user dot password rather, and we'll just put password in there. Then we can set logged in user to a new user, and this is a default implementation of the iUser interface, and we're just going to pop a GUID into there. I'm just going to throw in a reusable GUID there, and we'll call that Mark GUID, and we'll put Mark in there, and we'll set location to input.return URL, and we'll just return status.cOther, and if that hasn't worked, then we'll set location back to /login, and we'll return status.cOther there as well. So that's our login handled. We just need to put in a URI template on this class as well, and put that on /login, and so we have 2 identical URI templates, but the interface here that says what that action is going to be is different, and that means that those do not conflict. So this will now let us get into the admin page, and then what we need to do is let's just pop a quick output raw HTML in there for the time being, and we'll just something in there to make sure that that's working for the time being. So if I now run this page up, and then I attempt to go to the admin page, and you can see that's taken us off to the login page with the return URL set, with all the URI encoding necessary there, and then we can just put in mark and password and hit enter, and that's taken us straight back there again. Let's just try and work out why that's done that. Okay, so I forgot something. Okay, apologies for the brief interruption and potential jumping of the screen there. My laptop just got very upset about something, so I've had to restart Visual Studio. So yes, the reason that the login wasn't working is that I need to set up an authentication provider, and so we'll put in an authentication setup class in our startup folder. These things don't need to be in a startup folder, they can be anywhere you like to put them. And then in here we are just going to put some configuration to say configuration dot authentication provider equals new default authentication provider. And having done that, we should now be able to run our application up and go over to the admin page, get redirected to a login page, and we'll put in mark, password, and we get taken to the admin screen there. So let's make the admin screen do something useful, shall we? Let's go back into there, and we want to display a lovely list of sign-ups to our administrator so that they can do something with them. So let's say rdb equals database dot open named connection, and we'll put awesome thing in there, and then we're going to return a list of sign-ups. So we'll say I output a list of sign up, and we'll just create our own local sign up class here as well, that's got more information in it than our previous sign up class did, and we'll pull in the GUID and the datetime and the email in there, and then we will just say output, let's let that create the output property, and then we'll just say output equals db.signups.all.toList of signup, and simple data will take care of turning that into a select and managing the casting and everything else. And the last thing we want to do on here is to turn off caching for this page, because we don't want this getting cached. So we are just going to return cache options dot disable caching, which is a static class within cache options that basically just nukes any attempts at caching at any point by the server, by the client, by whatever it might be. So that's everything in there, and now we can go in and below our views folder we can create another new folder, and we'll call this admin. We'll put our admin views in there, and we're just going to put an index.cshtml below our admin folder, and we'll just call that index.cshtml. And in here we are just going to put in this code here. So here we're not using the handler, we're just saying that when we have a list of awesome thing admin sign up, this is what we're going to use to display those. And we've got a title up there that says sign up so far, and of course we want jQuery and also some sign-ups, so we can install jQuery just by saying install package jQuery, and that will bring that down for us from NuGet, and there we can see that scripts jQuery has been created for us. And then we're also going to add a JavaScript file in there, and we'll call that signups.js, and we'll be putting some custom code in there shortly. So that's our index there. If we now rerun the application and go back into admin through our authentication, and there we get that code. Now this is not using the list of signups that we got from the admin page, and the reason it's not doing that is because we're going to use JavaScript and jQuery to download those results on the fly. So let's start writing some nice JavaScript to go into here, and we'll just set up our ready function here, and we'll say $.ajax setup in there, just to make absolutely sure that no caching happens. We're going to disable it at the Ajax level, and then we're going to say $.get JSON, and we're going to go straight back to /admin. So we're going to the same URL that we came from, but this time we're, rather than asking for text/HTML, we're asking for application/JSON, and then if that succeeds, we're going to call another function, data, and then we will just say for, that's not the right kind of for loop, is it? We'll just say for in, index in data, and in here we can just say $#list.append, and in there we'll put in an li plus data index dot email. And close that list tag there, like that. And of course, if there's an error, we want to report that as well. Okay, so we'll just go back into our admin page there, and we've got that signups page. And if we now go back in to admin, and we'll log in, and we can see that we got those filled in by that bit of JavaScript. Now that's something, I suppose. We've got our list of signups available, but we can't really do anything with them at that point. And so at this point I'm just going to drop back to the slides very, very quickly to talk about some REST and RESTful API development. So REST APIs have become enormously popular over the last few years, and very few REST APIs are actually RESTful. Most people seem to believe that a REST API is any API that works over HTTP. That's wrong on two counts. It's perfectly possible to create an HTTP API that is not RESTful. Moreover, it's theoretically possible to create a RESTful API that doesn't use HTTP, although most people don't. I'm not a RESTifarian by any stretch of the imagination, but there are aspects of proper RESTful APIs that, if you do them properly, really do improve the flexibility and reliability of your application, decrease the coupling between client and server code, and do just generally make your life easier. And so one of the things I'm trying to do with SimpleWeb is to make creating RESTful API as easy as possible. And I was in Amsterdam recently and was watching a presentation on RESTful APIs, and the chap who was giving the presentation, whose name eludes me, basically threw out the term REST and went instead for this HATEOAS, HATEOAS. It stands for Hypertext as the Engine of Application State, and it effectively adds or clarifies some of the constraints that an API needs to meet in order to be considered RESTful. And so one of those is this concept of hypermedia. So all the resources within your RESTful API should have links to other resources, and also each resource should have its own canonical link. If you say /customers/1 is where you go to get the customer with the ID of 1, then that should be the only place you go to get the customer with the ID of 1. And so anytime the server returns the customer with the ID of 1, it should include that link. Equally well, anything that you can do to that customer should also be included in there. And the other aspect of this is content type negotiation. So we're looking at objects currently being returned as text/HTML or application/JSON. Actually, that is just the media type. The content type can be much more descriptive about what the object that's being returned is, and so you can have application/vnd.customer plus JSON would say this is a customer object, and I happen to have encoded it or serialized it as JSON. And by communicating with this extra level of we can create clients that can adapt as the server changes, and we can be sure that we can make changes in the server without necessarily needing to go through and update a lot of client code. And that's true whether you're creating a web application or a rich application, a mobile application, whatever it may be. So how does SimpleData try and make this easier? Well, we have some RESTy attributes which you can apply to your handlers. So we have a canonical attribute which you can pass in a model type that says this URL, this handler, is the canonical URI for this particular resource, and that will generate a link with its relationship set to self in the output. There's also a links from, which is a good example of dependency inversion. So rather than the model needing to know what its possible state transitions are and what you might be able to do with the model, all the things that you could do to the model are able to say, I'm something that you can do to this model. And that makes it very, very easy to add in additional functionality. You don't need to go in and change the model or any of the existing code in order to be able to add new functionality, to be able to do something new to a customer. And we also have responds to and responds with, which just gives you an extra layer of filtering over which handler is going to be used to service a resource. So we can say responds with JSON or XML or HTML, and responds to different types as well. So let's take a look at how we can implement this in our code. So we created a sign up class in here, and that's got a GUID ID and a created at ID. So let's see if we can't put something into the code here, and we'll just create a new class and we'll call it get sign up, and this is going to be this is going to be the canonical resource for downloading some sign up information. So before I go any further, we see here that we've got an admin class here, and this has already got I require authentication and I get and various other things on it, and is specifying this URI template here. So rather than keep putting I require authentication on everything, I'm just going to go to refactor and say extract superclass, and I'm going to pull up the I require authentication code there into a superclass, and then I'm going to copy up the URI template and put that up there, and then I'm just going to change this URI template to say slash, because the URI template is actually included in what admin is inheriting from admin base. So we can see there that the admin base is saying, okay, I'm based on /admin, and I require authentication, and I'm declaring that property there, and then we should be able to go back into the code here and go to /admin, and that takes us off to that login page as before, and that's picking that up from there. So having done that, we can now go into get sign up, and we can just inherit admin base in there. Of course, the other thing we do need to do is to make admin base abstract, just to make sure that nobody tries to create an instance of that. And so get sign up is going to implement the iGet interface, and it's going to return an instance of sign up. So we will just say I output sign up like that. And we'll just let that implement that member as well. So that's the get sign up thing there. We'll just put in a URI template, and in here we'll put /signup/ID, and it's just occurred to me that that's actually the first time we've put something into one of our URI templates that's going to set a property, and I'm an hour and 6 minutes into the presentation and I haven't mentioned this yet. So where in a traditional MVC application with action methods you might have an ID parameter that gets passed in to that action method, in Simple we can just specify that ID property on that ID field there, and that will be set for us automatically as well. So now we can go into here and we can just open our named connection again and go into awesome thing, and then we'll say output equals db.signups.findById ID, and then if output is null, as it will be if nothing has been found by that operation, then we can return a 404, otherwise we'll just return 200, and then we will do whatever we do with that. So this allows us to download this sign up. We want to mark this as being the canonical resource for the sign up type. So we can go into here and put the canonical attribute on there, and this has a couple of required parameters. The first is the type, and then we also need a URI template. So there may be multiple URI templates that could bring us to this point one way or another. And you can have multiple instances of the URI template attribute on a type and have that serve more than one URL as far as the client is concerned. But only one of those can be the canonical URL, as is the nature of canonical. Then we've got some optional parameters in here as well, which we can use for display on the client side, and then we can put type in, and in there we'll say application/bnd.signup, and that's our content type for this class. So that's now set that up. If we now go back in to signups.js script, and we can actually put some code in here that will allow us to pull the information about that URL out. So let's just copy in a couple of convenience methods that we've got here. So the way SimpleWeb serializes the JSON object, it puts in a link collection, and that link has a rel property, and we can check to see, we can basically look through that collection of links and find the one with the rel that we want. And so in here, where we've got the list being built, we can say href equals, and then in there we'll put get self href data index, and then close that down there like that, and then over here of course we'll need to close that link, and now we can run that again, and go into the admin page and go in here, and we can see that we've got down at the bottom there, we've just got object coming out, which is not what we want. I'm having so much fun. So yes, excuse me, I tried to do some debugging and hit F10 and that stops Camtasia from recording. I will get better at this sometime, I promise. So if I just bring this browser window up into view here, and we can see that down at the bottom there we have automatically pulled out the canonical reference for that, and there's no endpoint there serving that at this point. So yes, but we pulled that out, and this get link and get self href function is not specific to signups. This is a perfectly standard bit of JavaScript that we could just put into a utility library and use on any objects that are being returned from SimpleWeb where that canonical link exists. So that's the canonical link. The more interesting thing here is the idea of being able to represent state transitions. So let me just move admin base into another file there. So I want to allow the administrator to send an email, and to that end I want to create the send email endpoint. So I'm going to go in here and just add another email send, and I will call this send email, and in here I'm going to derive again from admin base to ensure that we are authenticated, and this is going to be a post endpoint with an I input of sign up, and we'll just implement all the necessary interfaces there. Now at this point we will just return a 201 status, because this is going to be called from JSON, and so we just want a 201. That's fine, no content, but it all worked perfectly well. And we have an input here, and we're going to put in a URI template, and we'll just put /send email. So because we're inheriting from admin base, that's going to be /admin/send email. And then at this point we are going to put a links from attribute, which is in the simple.web.links namespace, and here we're just going to put in type of sign up, and we will put in again a URI template that says /admin/send email /ID, and then we can put some other things in here. And because this isn't a canonical link, we need to tell the client what type of relationship this is, and so we want something that is both human and application readable. So dot separated list is generally quite a good idea at this point, and then we can put in a title here that says send invitation, which the application can use if it wants to. And so we've got that in there, and if we now go back into our signups.js file over here, and we can just put in an extra line of code here to get that invitation link out, and then let's just copy in some extra code here. We're just going to paste that in there. And wrap that around onto a new line. And so what we're doing here is we're saying get the link for that send invitation rel. So the client knows there's going to be a relationship to send an invitation, but it doesn't need to know anything beyond that. The href for that and the title and everything else can be got from the metadata that's been delivered along with the object. And so if we run this again now and go into admin, and we'll just log in there, and we can see we've got that send invitation email link, and the hint down at the bottom there is basically saying admin send email 4809 F4DA, and obviously what you would do there is put in some JavaScript code to actually intercept that click and send the sign up data up as a JSON object. We're not going to do that now. I just want to take a look at one more thing that I like about SimpleWeb, and then I will let you go off and download the code and have a play with it yourself, and I hope that that you will. So the last thing I want to take a look at is testability. Testing web applications, testing controllers and various things is generally rather challenging, because you have contexts, you have requests, you have all these different aspects of an HTTP application that you need to mock up in some way in order to be able to test usually a fairly small and self-contained piece of functionality. And as you've seen, SimpleWeb doesn't actually require you to talk to any of these HTTP things. It defines these interfaces. These interfaces are all set from the HTTP information for you, and you can just get on with the business of creating something that takes the various inputs and produces the various outputs. And so this makes it particularly easy to test an application. So if we just drop back in to our application here, and say we wanted to do some testing of the send email class, so we can create a new project, and we'll call it, we're just going to create a Windows class library, and we'll call it awesomething.tests, and in awesomething.tests we will install package xunit. And then I can change this to send email test, and I will put a fact in there that says public void sends email, and in here I can just create a new instance of the send email class, reference awesome thing, and of course we need to pop over there and we'll just make sure we've got a reference to that simple.web library there, so we've got all the interfaces, and then we can just say target.input equals new sign up, and we can just specify a GUID, or rather ID equals GUID.empty, and created at equals datetime 2012 7/18, and email equals bob@bob.com. And then we can do something to our target, so we can say target.post, and we can just say assert.equal target.post and 201. And so we're just going to check that that runs there. So if I just build this application here quickly and run that, and I get a nice green test passing on my resharper test output. The other thing that we need to do here then is just to make sure that that's doing something sensible with the information that it's getting in. So let's just create a quick interface called public interface email sender, which is going to have a we don't need the public on there, do we? Send void send email string address string body, and then up here we will have a constructor. So we're going to have a private read-only email sender, and then we'll set that from a constructor parameter. And then in order to have that set, we need to install some dependency injection code. So I'm going to install package simple.web.inject. And then I just need to add some startup code for inject in here, and actually just going to copy in some code there, and we can create a dummy email sender. So we'll just let's actually just call this email sender. That's not an interface, it's a class, and then we'll just implement that and take that out, and that's not going to do anything at all at this point, but we will just make that work there. But then of course in our test we can use a mocking framework. So if I just come down to here, and we'll install one last package, and we'll use nsubstitute for this, and then we can close down the readme, and we'll just put in some substitution here. So then I can create a lovely mock, and we'll just say var sender equals substitute dot for my email sender, and we'll pass that sender in there, and then down here we will say sender dot received once dot send email, and that should have gone to bob at bob.com, and we'll make that just say hello at this point, and let me just drag the resharper interface down onto the bottom of the window there so we can see what's going on. And if I now run that test there, I can see that nsubstitute caused that to fail, and if I now go into email and just add in some code that says underscore email sender dot send email, input dot email and hello, and then run that test again, and we can see that that is now passing, and I can test all the functionality on my send email class without needing to muck about with any HTTP at all. So that is a basic introduction to simple.web. There are more things it can do. I am hoping to be coming to a user group near you to present more detail on it, and as I said at the start of this video, if there are any questions or anything you'd like help with, or particularly if you want to use SimpleWeb and just need some help getting started, do get in touch with me through either Twitter or my blog. There's a contact page on there, or you can get hold of me through GitHub. There's SimpleWeb's hosted on there. I'm going to go off and fix up that problem with the web.config that we saw at the start. Thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.